Hi there, Frank Winston here for the Pacifica Historical Society, host of the weekly show Footprints of Pacifica, where we discover and explore the lure and the lore of lovely Pacifica, its character and its characters. The focus of today's show is Sharp Park Golf Course, an attraction for over 75 years here in Pacifica, even it's older than Pacifica. What made it so popular? How did it come to be? That's what we'll look at today with our guest in the studio, Barbara Arrieta. But first, to explore this function of San Francisco. Yes, that's right. A few people realize that it is owned by the City and County of San Francisco, and it's run by the City and County of San Francisco Parks and Recreation Department. We're going to have a video first that brings you through a very brief history, and then on to Barbara. Roll the video, please.
Well, the Sharp Park Golf Course actually started way before it was a golf course. We have to go back to 1800s, really, when the George Sharp and his wife Honoree Sharp lived in San Francisco, and he died. He was a lawyer. He died, and his wife had this property down here. It's about a 410-acre piece of property down here in Pacifica, which was not Pacifica as we know at that time. And he died, and she wanted to really do something as a memorial to him. So in 1905 she died, and her properties were all willed over to her lawyers and attorneys, and so they really took care of the property. And around 1915, 1916, they bequested the property to the city of San Francisco. So the story and the myth is really that Mrs. Sharp gave this property to San Francisco, which in reality it did not happen. Her lawyers and attorneys actually gave their property to San Francisco, and so it was through the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Department in San Francisco that this property now belonged. And so at that time, the Harding Golf Course and the Lincoln Golf Course were really flourishing, and there was a lot of golfers in San Francisco who were playing on the weekends, and they needed some place to go to play another golf course perhaps. And so they thought about coming down here and looking at this area, and they got a hold of the people, the lawyers that had the property, and they sold it to the San Francisco, and it was deeded into there, bequested into the will and everything, that this land could only be used as recreational need. For example, you can't build condos on here, you can't build a 10-rise business on this facility. It can only be used for recreation. So they built this golf course in the late 1920s. They hired the consultant Alistair McKenzie, who was a well-known architect at that time, to come down and design this course. Now, he already had designed a course down in the peninsula, Monterey area, called the Cypress Golf Course. And that course, the point of that golf course and the picturesque part of that golf course were the cypress trees. And he thought that would be a nice element to put here at this golf course, which would then be called Sharp Park, in honor of Mr. Sharp, who had died. And so they started building this, and McAllister really was not known as much for this golf course as he was for the golf course he built next time around, which is, we all know, which is in Augusta, Georgia, is where the Masters is. That's what he's really famous for. But had elements not happened here at this golf course in the late 1930s, and perhaps maybe in the 1970s later on, where the weather took over our course here, this course might have been, who knows, as well as famous as Augusta, Georgia. You never know that. But anyway, what happened here, they came in and they designed the course, they built the course in the late 1920s, and then in 1931 it started getting its finishing looks, and in April 16th, 1932, it opened up to what it is now as the Sharp Park Golf Course. About 400 people were here that day to play the golf course for a tune about 70 cents a round, and on the weekends you could play for $1 a round. So compared to what that is today, that was a pretty good bargain, I would think. And so they built this golf course, and it was flourishing for the first couple of years. And then in 1938, a storm came through. Now, if you look back, and you've seen this course, along the beaches there were about 6 holes, number 2 through 8, that were on the ocean side. Beautiful holes, really nice, and the view was beautiful. You go out and play, you could look out and see the ocean. It was a master golf course. When in 1938, the storms came through and destroyed the holes. So they had to relocate some of the holes. So it really diminished the course just a little bit, and it was not as long as it was. The holes were cut shorter. So from 1938 to about 1970, when the next storm came in, that next storm then took some more holes out. So you don't have it as beautiful as it was when Mackenzie looked at it in 1932. Now in the 1960s, the freeway came through. Before that, it was just a little short road that came through the middle of town, and there were 3 holes on the east side of the road. There was 13, 14, and 15 holes on the east side of the road. When the 1960s, when they built the major highway, then they moved 4 holes over to the east side, the 4, 5, 6, and 7 holes, which are now known as what we call the canyon holes. What happened was when that highway came through, they had to relocate the holes, and they had to shorten some holes, and we have the golf course as what we know today. Unfortunately, during the winter times, the rains come, and the drainage system here, when they set it down in 1928, 1930, when they built it, they had to lay out the fairways. Well, somewhere along the line at that time, they didn't have the great machinery and tools that we had today. So at some point in that line, the materials did not really set the fairways the way it should have to hold the water. So over the years, what happens is when that rain comes, it all settles on the golf course. And the Laguna Salada Lake in the back of me back here overflows, and of course we have problems.
The bulk of our problem this year is from the excessive high tides suffered along the coastline here in Pacifica about 2.5 weeks ago, with tides cresting in excess of 8 feet. We understand this is the highest tide in 53 years on our section of the coast, and our seawall along the edge of the golf course was unable to bear the strain of this water for 8 straight days, and our seawall has collapsed. The levee has collapsed at least 200 feet of it at the south end of the golf course, allowing the entire ocean to come in, covering our 11th hole. This is the area we normally pump off all the runoff water from Pacifica that enters our big lagoon here, and we have no way of pumping it off out in that area, as the water of the ocean is higher than the level of the golf course for the past 2.5 weeks.
Now, ironically, you bounce back a little bit and you talk about what was here before the golf course was here. There was nothing here. It was farmland. And on the adjacent side of the golf course was a house owned by a family called, his name was Pete Bastoffi and his family. They owned this property where number 2 hole would be where we look at it today. That would be where they would be located. I did an interview with Pete earlier this year. We were talking about the Sharp Park Golf Course and some people who played here really early when it was built. And he was one of the people that played here as a kid, caddied as a youngster here, and we happened to come into the clubhouse, and he walked me over to this picture, and he showed me, this is the picture that shows where his parents' house was located adjacent to the golf course, and I thought it was interesting to see that there was really wide open space here, and this area right here is where his house was located. And then, of course, as I said earlier, they sold it and moved into Daly City. But as you can see here, it's wide open golf course, wide open area right there. But to live that close to a golf course and years later to know that your house is actually almost on the golf course is pretty interesting, I believe. the Sharp Park Clubhouse, historical landmark. We're here in Pacifica. In fact, it went on the dedication of historical landmarks several years ago for Pacifica. It's still in really it was original built. No damage to it other than occasionally when years ago when the rains came in, it almost came right into the clubhouse, washed in there. But it's standing, and you look at it, you can't touch it because of the historical concept of it. But you go inside today, you see golfers in there eating breakfast or in there talking about their golf games and how they hope they had shot that hole-in-one out here. But it's still standing, and you look around today. We're on a sunny afternoon here in Pacifica, and what better weather could you ask for than to play golf on the day like today?
Back in the studio, welcome Barbara Arrieta, who is a longtime resident of Pacifica, very active in the Pacifica Historical Society, Pacifica Democrats, represents our city on the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, and is a historian of Sharp Park Golf Course. Barbara, welcome, and tell me first of all, where is the golf course? If someone were not from Pacifica, or even many people in Pacifica, where's that located?
All right. Well, actually, the Sharp Park Golf Course is located, I would say, in the heart of Pacifica. Just about midway. If you're going down Highway 1, you would drive down to Sharp Park Road and take exit 505, Sharp Park Boulevard, make a right turn, and there you are. You're at Sharp Park Golf Course.
Crossroad of Francisco Boulevard.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the golf course has a unique history, of course, but going back, Horace had mentioned some things about the Sharp family. Do you have some more to contribute regarding Sharp George himself?
Well, George Sharp arrived in San Francisco in 1849 as a young 22-year-old man. He was determined to make his fortune, and he did. He became a very wealthy attorney. And George married Honore, and they lived as bon vivants in San Francisco. Back in the day, that was the way to go, and they lived in some of the finest hotels that San Francisco had to offer. But he also collected land, and he bought some land down on the San Mateo rugged coast at the time, which we now know as Sharp Park. But at that time, it was simply land without a name on the coast. And
did he and his family live here, or did they just own the bare land?
They eventually built a small little house. It wasn't something that they really lived at. It was something they might visit as you would a weekend retreat, a cabin in the woods, as it were. But this one is actually a little house down the coast. And San Mateo County at that time was used by a lot of the wealthy people in San Francisco as a retreat, to go picnicking, to stay for a weekend, or to even stay for a day. But they used to use it as a little playground.
Okay, and then moving forward, after he died in 1882, then did Mrs. Sharp use the land in any different way, or just?
Well, actually, a tragic thing happened back in the Eastern Canyon of where their land was. Their 12-year-old boy drowned in an accident, and so Mrs. Sharp really did not want anything to do with living in that area or even visiting that area per se, for the grief that it brought on. And that may be the reason why her husband died so young. He died at the age of 45. He had a heart attack in the courtroom. And so Mrs. Sharp lived out her life living in hotels as she once did.
When she died, she had no heirs then. Her son had died, so
Correct.
What happened to the land at that point?
Good point. She had two executors at that point. She left it Reuben Lloyd and Adolph Spreckles. These are names that you might find in Golden Gate Park if you're wandering around. These were Park and Rec commissioners. They were very wealthy. They were also attorneys.
Was that Spreckles from the Spreckles Sugar
You
operation?
got it.
Okay.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And In 1905, when Mrs. Sharp died, she gave it over to these two gentlemen. They owned the land jointly, and in 1916, Mr. Spreckles decided, for the tune of $10 gold, to give it over to San Francisco. And now we have Reuben Lloyd left with half of the land and San Francisco with the other half. The next year, Reuben Lloyd unfortunately passed away. So his executor was Samuel Murphy. And Samuel Murphy was the person who wrote into, when he gave it over to San Francisco, he wrote in the caveat that it must always be held in perpetuity for recreational purposes. And I want to point out, it didn't say it had to be a golf course.
But if it's for recreational purposes, was it being used at the time of that gentleman's death for recreation? It was just a plot of land again.
It was just a plot of land.
So when did
Right.
it develop as
Right.
recreation, whether golf course or otherwise?
In the early 1920s, golf caught on very quickly with Harding and Lincoln in San Francisco.
Those are
And-
city golf courses. city-owned.
Exactly, city
Okay.
golf courses. And it turned out that San Francisco had to look around and find out, where are we going to find the land? We need to buy and build another golf course. And they went, oh, we've got a lot of land down the coast. Well, they went down there and they bought a little extra land and added on to it because they needed a few more lots for whatever they needed. And the whole thing became the 410 acres. And they, at that point, commissioned a man by the name of Dr. Alistair McKenzie. And Dr. Alistair McKenzie, for the folks who are not aware of golf course architecture, is considered to be the Michelangelo of golf course architecture.
Okay.
And Alistair McKenzie had just come off a wonderful feat of building the Cypress Point Golf Club in Monterey, California. So he came up here, but before he built Sharp Park, he built the Meadow Club over in
Meaning
Fairfax.
Sharp Park Golf Course.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. He built the Meadow Club in Fairfax in Marin County,
County.
came back here, and he designed this wondrous golf course, and he made it a links. And a links is a special type of golf course. It's built on undulating sands. Linkus is a Scott word for ridge, many ridges. And so he took advantage of what Mother Nature had done with the earth and what the waters had carved in and how the winds had carved it. And he built his links course, a rarity. Links courses are rarities.
And there are even fewer today.
You got it. As a matter of fact, out of the 20 courses that Dr. McKenzie built in this country, there are only 3 that are public that you can see. And out of those 3, Sharp Park is the links course.
By public, you mean as distinguished from the private clubs, which cost much to join and remain in. This is
Right.
literally open. Now, is it open only to San Franciscans because they own it, or only to Pacificans? How does that operate?
Well, this is a daily fee course. It is open to everybody. San Franciscans, of course, as residents, get a reduced rate, the best reduced rates. And the Pacificans also have a certain reduced rate, but not as good as the San Franciscans, I hear. And anybody who wants to golf here is welcome to golf here.
Now, you had mentioned the links course, and you also had done some research on a book called Missing Links. And you want to tell us a little bit about that, and golf course of Sharp Park is in here as well.
Well, this is written by a golf pro and a writer and a golf enthusiast by the name of Daniel Wexler. And it started out from a telephone conversation that he had with a friend of his. And they were talking about what would you do if you had a chance to go to X golf course and play that golf course, and if you could find the links that were there but aren't there now. And so he started this premise, and he went out and found a lot of golf courses, and he was on a mission, as it were, a quest.
And how did Sharp Park Golf Course fit into his findings?
Oh, well,
We can
Sharp
put the book there.
Sharp Park Golf Course and his findings, had we maintained the holes that were washed away in those deluges, he felt that Sharp Park Golf Course, which was designed by Alistair McKenzie, was the finest municipal golf course in this country in its original condition. On April 16th, 1932, when this golf course opened its doors, it was a municipal masterpiece.
Now, what he had a conclusion, and I think it's either in the jacket or you wrote it, as to how it really compared. Yeah. if you have that
He
handy.
said oceanfront hotels and double fairways, McKinsey bunkers, and a marvelous scenery. The best golf course that was ever built.
And today it's used not only by Pacificans and San Franciscans, but people from all over.
That is correct.
Now, but San Francisco still maintains the operation.
Yes, they do.
Okay. Now, you have have you played the golf course?
No, I haven't. I have an injury that we won't go into, but
Okay.
I'm precluded from golfing. But my husband plays the golf course.
Okay. Now, and there was one famous person, or at least in golf history, who's identified with the Sharp Park Golf Course.
Locally, I keep hearing the name Leo Landy. And Leo Landy was a golf pro who to this day still holds the record at the golf course. He shot a 63 back in the day, and nobody has broken that record.
Par was what?
72.
That's been that all the way through.
You got it.
Even
Yeah,
when it was
72.
redesigned. And it's clear from your description and that of Horst, it cannot be restored today, not merely because of the replacing the holes, but the whole land, whole sections have been gone, and the freeway tore it down. So what could we hope for if it were to be rebuilt? You could never get that classic look, except...
Well, I know what you're saying, but at the same time, there's still beauty to that golf course. And the fact that it was designed by Alistair McKenzie, albeit that it has been changed on the oceanside holes, there is still that magnificent feeling of wonder when you're out there among the trees and with the ocean on the other side, and you're coming down Sharp Park Road and you see that. It's a marvelous.
We also have a
marvelous
photo
scene.
of long ago, I believe you have in here too.
Yes.
You might point out some of that. Let's
Well,
let me
this-
hold this up here.
okay.
See if you just point to
Right. Now over here, this you're not going to recognize because this is all gone. This no longer exists. All of this land no longer exists. This picture was taken in 1955, and the various storms and the natural erosion of the coast have removed all of this. So what we have here is, you can't see it, I'm sure, with the television lens because it's so faint, but we have Laguna Salada Lake, and this is the golf course up here, and part of it is here. Today, we would have, this is gone, and perhaps the berm is that wall that we put in the 80s to keep the sea from flooding down into the golf course. Local citizens will recognize it for people who walk their dogs and people who walk just to walk on that berm and see the beautiful ocean and look at the golf course also. But I would say the berm would be just in this direction. All of this is gone, and this was in 1955.
I would imagine, but it's my guess, that in 1932, when it was designed and installed, the wildlife and any other kind of recreation area was not considered. You built what you wanted. Today, however, there are environmental concerns to protect the golf course, and if you wanted to reconstruct it, and sometimes it can't even be played because of concern for some of the environmental issues. You want to relate to how that is today compared to when it originally started?
Well, as you say, things were free and easy when it was first built, and I think that there's more awareness of the environment in today's age. What we have here is a habitat, and it's a habitat, one of the primary habitats of the red-legged frog. And the red-legged frog mates and lays its eggs in the wintertime, and the waters rise in the wintertime with the rains, etc. And this is where they lay their eggs, and we can't really touch those habitats until they're hatched and nature takes its course. Sometimes we find that packs the operation, and they've gone as long as 3 or 4 months without full operation.
I wanted to mention a personal note of your own golf experience with a famous Bay Area celebrity, which was Tiger Woods. But before we get into that, and we have only a couple of minutes, is there anything else that we should share with the audience about the golf course itself?
Well, Willis Polk's architectural firm designed the building, and even though Willis Polk himself didn't design it, Angus McSweeney, who was taught by Willis Polk, was the person who executed the architectural, and it was also used as, or actually made into, a historical site on July 22nd, 1985.
When you say historical site,
just the building, not the golf course lands per se.
Clubhouse. Okay.
Right.
And now we can share, just on a personal note, where you happen to be at the right place at the right time at a San Francisco public golf course as well.
That is exactly right. It was the American Express Golf Championships, and I believe it was in the fall of 2005. And my husband was off to find Tiger Woods because my husband was the golfer, so he assigned me to park the car. Took me a long time to park the car, and by the time that I did, there was nobody around, so I went through a hole in the fence because I didn't know where I was going, and I wandered around on an empty golf course, again, because I didn't know where I was going. Then somebody yelled out at me and said, "Lady, don't move." And I thought, they're supposed to say 4. But I stopped dead in my tracks, and a ball landed about 3 feet in front of me. So I thought, well, that was a lucky shot, and I was starting to walk away, and they told me, "No, you can't walk away." And I said, "No, I'm fine." And they said, "That's his ball." And I said, "Whose ball?" And he said, "Tiger's ball. And that means you get to stay with Tiger when he shoots it." And I was like frozen, and then all of a sudden I heard the crowd come. It looked like Caesar and the Roman legions coming over that 12th mound, and they came over. He came up to me, he turned around to the people, he looked at me, and they said, "She's the one where the ball landed." And he says, "Okay, fine, you stay there."
I've got to wrap it up here, so we have to freeze your comment on your success with Tiger Woods, and thanks for sharing with us about the history of the golf course. And remember, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.